Between 1990 and 2006, the training's techniques LDR, HYPERFLEXION, Rollkur was slowly accepted in national and international dressage. Unfortunately, these techniques also found their way into the Spanish riding school.
Between 2007 and 2015, many observations were reported, and critical voices were raised, which had noticed the clear signs of LDR, Rollkur, HYPERFLEXION training, in the movement patterns of the stallions. The management of the Spanish riding school rejected them vehemently. Then the SRS herself published a video, in which it should be proven that these techniques were not used. However, this video speaks for itself. We show excerpts from it here in slow motion and place the movement patterns on them in direct comparison to the movement patterns of a stallion, more than 28 years of age, in the solo presented in the 1990s, where classical riding according to the directives is shown. The SRS published the videos in 2015 for public use on their FB page and via YouTube. They commented April 28, 2015, quote, "Certain pictures currently being circulated on the internet accuse the riders of the Spanish riding school of a riding style viewed as harmful to horses. The photos referred to have been taken from a documentary produced by Horse and Country TV in cooperation with the riders of the Spanish riding school. It was produced in 2014 during a tour to Malmö and has been broadcasted several times. If you have a look at the complete film, you will reach the conclusion that these accusations made against the Spanish riding school are unsustainable. The recently circulated pictures are snapshots taken from a slow-motion sequence of the documentary for the purposes of creating a negative impression and have nothing to do with reality. Someone deliberately searched through the slow-motion sequences and picked out the frames that give the impression of a negative riding style. If you watch the complete sequences, you would notice that they display the normal lowering and stretching of the horse's neck. The mere fact that the film was produced in close cooperation with the riders makes it clear that it does not show an improper riding style. On the contrary, it shows the proper education and work with the horses, to which we attribute great value. Therefore, we reiterate that the accusations of the use of hyperflexion are unsustainable. Spanish Riding School, Federal Stud Piber, close quote.
The SRS had not only provided the proof that they had abandoned the path of classic riding and their own directives in favor of modern, dubious methods, and that also the so-called modern dressage had obviously been chosen as the new path, and thus also the new goal of the Spanish riding school in Vienna. It is unbelievable that a dressage method recently has been propagated that demands literal, blind obedience, even though such training is in every way against the nature of the horse. In this method, the horse, which is by nature a flight animal, has no means of evasion, no possibility of escaping the predator in the saddle. In nature, a horse balances himself up and out. That means he carries his neck as a balancing rod high and proud or long and stretched to the ground with its nose in front of the vertical. This can be seen out in the pasture. Classical training uses these natural neck positions, offering the horse the chance to use its neck for balance, also when ridden. Training with the head on the chest, on the other hand, creates fear, tension, loss of trust, and ultimately physical and psychological damage. The FEI looks on without action. Even worse, many medals are given to horses trained in such a torturous way. It makes the training of a dressage horse into a farce, when a horse, so trained, is proclaimed the happiest horse of the year. The Dutch dressage riders dominated the European Championship in 2009 at the British Windsor and cleaned up in gold medals. They used this manner of riding, which they called the New Dutch School. Since this method, which isn't limited to Dutch riders, is continually criticized, the promoters try to not only justify this training method, but also to represent it as another, modern way of training the sport horse. They describe their school as a new revolutionary riding method, with the extraordinary claim of bringing psychology, natural horsemanship and science together. They suggest that their method represents a further evolution of the classical, horse-friendly riding culture. In actuality, it is far from the intentions and results of the classical teachings that are still the basis for today's national and international dressage sport. If you study their method from the standpoint of the horse, it is not another, shorter or more efficient way to roam, but rather a path with a different goal. I am reminded of the famous drawing of Horse Heaven, with the Duke of Newcastle. He was a Baroque English horse trainer, who was very taken with himself. He is credited with having invented the draw reins, and dominated all of his horses in a manner we would now refer to as predatory. In one of his books he had himself drawn in Horse Heaven, with all the horses he had trained, honoring and practically praying to him. The motto, "He who dominates, is beloved," was coined here more than 300 years ago. Even he tried to justify the exploitation of horses for the satisfaction of personal vanity as Horse Heaven. The school which propagates LDR, low, deep and round riding, doesn't just use an unnatural overflexed posture, it relies on the total domination of the horse. Here is a typical picture of the modern riding school in a test. The back is dropped, there is absolute elevation, no bending of the haunches, and a tail swishing in agitation. Spectacular movements are achieved that are evidently preferred to a round, physiologically meaningful movement pattern. Finally, I am politely allowed to make a personal remark about my encounter with the new Spanish riding school and why I made this documentation. Since I have been dealing with the effects of non-horse-friendly training methods for years, it was particularly shocking for me when I discovered through personal observation that this very institution makes use of such methods. After I, not being the only one, expressed myself critically, I was sued for omission in 2014 for a critical opinion article in the horse magazine Cavallo by the school's directors before the Vienna Commercial Court. A lengthy, complicated and arduous lawsuit ended 2018 in an agreement, without my having to withdraw a word of my criticism to the training methods used and their effects. As it is also noticeable in sport, many people know that there are fewer and fewer role models for the real classic horse-friendly training path. In addition, no longer is known what the movement pattern and the body expression of the horse looks like in classical horsemanship, and just as little know how you can tell that work is not done according to the rules of classical training. With this modest documentation, I hope to be able to contribute something to making the differences easier to see. And maybe those who haven't noticed before will recognize what has just been lost here in the beautiful Baroque riding arena during the past 20 years. The model for horse-friendly classical riding, in which the horse becomes a joyful, athletic, and wonderful dance partner of his rider, shows the impressed spectator what partnership between horse and human is capable of. I and many others are lucky enough to have seen it with our own eyes, and to be able to keep it in our memory forever. And that is the reason why I put this documentation together. Because classic horse fair and partnership-based horsemanship matters.
Dr. Ulrike Thiel, clinical psychologist, comes from Vienna and is director of the Institute for Equine Therapy and Equestrian Psychology Kranandonk, the Netherlands. She has practiced various branches of equestrian sport herself, is a riding and vaulting trainer, equitherapist, and was a dressage judge for years. She specialized in psychomotor and horsemanship. For many years she has studied the damaging consequences of Rollkur, LDR hyperflexion and absolute elevation on horses' welfare. Her book Being Ridden, Dressage from the Horse's Point of View describes riding as a harmonious dialogue in motion wherein the horse changes from flight animal to man's dance partner. The book would incorporate psychological as well as technical aspects of horse training, including the physical and mental learning processes, which the horse could experience as pleasant or unpleasant. Accordingly, she began the critical study that led to this book on the appropriateness of various training methods. Experience with her students, research and observations at both the top and the bottom of the sport, made it apparent to her that a systematic comparison of how different ways of riding affect the horse would be useful.